In November of 2020, an axis of nations enforced their authoritarian control over an entire Minecraft world. These events would culminate in market massacres, betrayals, possession by a demonic goddess, and an invasion that kicked off the First World War in Minecraft history. Everything in this story that you're about to see is true history on the Stoneworks Minecraft server. Here, you can work your way to be an emperor, a traveling prophet, a pioneering businessman, and much more just like you see in these videos. Only at this IP, play.stoneworks.gg. And remember to like and subscribe to this channel to keep up on Stoneworks history. Last we saw, the imperial crown of Yemu-Audal went missing, and the Divine Emperor of Asharia used this crisis as an opportunity to march on the capital city of Ernu-Arak and usurp the throne. Delatra, the stepping down empress of Yemu-Audal, committed suicide in her home, and was replaced as empress by the inexperienced and corrupted player Carpicius. This usurpation in the new chaos-hungry empress would put Yemu-Audal and Asharia directly on the path to war. However, we need to remember that none of this happened in a vacuum. The world of Rathnir at this time was a geopolitical chess match, so let's take a moment to zoom out and look at the progressing situation of the Stoneworks politics on this timeline. In the middle here, we have the throne's usurpation, Delatra's suicide, and the ascendancy of Empress Carpicius, all in mid-December. On the far end, we have the beginning of a massive world war. And where all this starts, let's rewind to one of the most influential conflicts in Minecraft history, the Golden War. These are spoilers for the video I made on the Golden War, so go check it out if you haven't seen it. The Golden War saw the nation of Bardonia become the single most militaristically capable state in all of Rathnir, beating out the formerly massive empire of Ulderash. The Golden War brought together three powers that would eventually form the most powerful alliance in Minecraft history. So let's look over what each of them did and who they were. Asharia was by far the most centralized and radical of the great powers in Rathnir. It was founded as soon as the first players migrated to Rathnir from the old collapsing world of Jagdis, and those migrating players came to dominate the native race of cold-hardened humans with big canine teeth called the Nidane. This state was politically united by the autocratic divine emperor Zika Ost, who spread the Soleanan pantheon and ruled by way of mandate from the god Solaris. Asharia won the first wars in Rathnir's history, and they established themselves early on as a power player that would fiercely defend its own corner of the world. However, as Asharia grew, it was not alone in its political sphere, as it shared the Sea of Pearls with the empire of Yemu-Audal. The proximity and cultural differences here created a friction between the two. Eventually they would end up in a war where YA sacked Asharia's capital, and thus began a long-standing rivalry. As a consequence, when Yemu-Audal backed their ally of Ulderash in the Golden War, Asharia sent troops and materials to assist the opposing Bardonians in their defense of Bardonia City. With the uncontested victory of Bardonia and the sack of Ulderash's holdings, Asharia had found friends with the strongest and most militarily ascendant state in Rathnir. As this happened though, Yemu-Audal grew extensively by settling towns in their desert frontiers, and under their previous emperor, Player Harbarder, they ate up more and more of the Sea of Pearls coast. And on top of this, there were racially Nidane players in Yemu-Audal, like the population of the Enosphie megacity right near the capital, who would soon rebel and receive support from Zika Ost under the table. So, the Emperor had a lot of reasons to adopt aggressive expansionism and absorb neutral coastal towns against Yemu-Audal. Many in YA would see Asharia as being a bunch of douchebags with religious superiority complexes, but I'm not here to make those kinds of judgments. Tensions arose between the two neighboring powers, and it became clear that Asharia would need allies if it was going to survive in an increasingly coalitioned world. And luckily, with their siding in the Golden War, they knew just the people to work with. Having the most capable fighters in Rathnir, Bardonia had free rein to influence the world's geopolitics for a while, and they would certainly seize this opportunity. As a nation itself, the Republic of Bardonia was led by a group of active players with a strong national identity. Their ancestors were led to this land by the Dandelion Prophets in a generational migration from the northwest, being told in visions to only stop and settle when they had reached the land of dandelions. There's more background to the lore here in the video by Whiskey Knight. Here in the land of Bardonia, these flowers would become their guiding spirits, and the place grew as a fishing town that would eventually prove to dominate in combat and national spirit. When the Golden War came, Bardonia received aid from the Empire of Asharia and the Silver Coalition to their north. Many in Bardonia initially did not like Asharia, what with their leader being a megalomaniacal religious nut. However, after the Asharians sent aid, their opinions softened until they created a defensive pact, one that would be kept totally secret from other nations at the behest of Zika Ost. So with the Golden War fought and won, Bardonia, Asharia, and their northern neighbor who also sent aid, the Silver Coalition, had established a loose triangle of relations. Now within Bardonia, the players created a system that was organized like an oligarchic republic, made up of its prominent members. Here we have famous players like Tizu, Back to the Hub, Moi, Ezexis, Unicorn Boy, and more. You may know some of these players today, as they're either still active in the community or they've gone down as legends in Minecraft history. They would convene in this black supervillain lair-looking tower in the restored castle of Durastarok. And one of their first motions after the Golden War was to work on making Bardonia the economic center of the whole world. In this castle appeared the first mass market for trading materials, and it became wildly successful. The shopkeeper Unicorn Boy would over time prove himself to be something of a leader in the Senate, but this was purely based on his initiative. Uni here would go behind the backs of his fellow senators and would strike deals with leaders of other countries before consulting anyone else. He would then bring these treaties to the Bardonian Senate after drawing them up and signing them, and the other senators would just be like, okay? And so Uni came to wield a lot of control in Bardonian affairs, simply because he could take that control by being active. And with this, he held secret meetings with the Asharian Emperor, as well as one rising leader from the north. We, of course, are talking about this massive country up north, founded when the players Julie Jajo and Darkblade T2 went around to the region's smaller kingdoms and expanded another player's already in place economic pacts. It's a bit complicated, but this would be places like Najerajad, the Sand Republic, Boravia, Lemaba, Icarus, and of course, their capital center of Noxnor. Eventually, this economic union became a political and somewhat cultural one, being named after the silver swords with which they defended together from werewolf bandit attacks, as well as the Noxnorians' religious appreciation for the moon's silver glow. The Silver Coalition was born. Now, around the time when the SC aided Bardonia in the Golden War, one leader from Najerajad grew in prominence as a spearhead of the nation's diplomacy and politics, Star 6-7. According to all the sources regarding Star's power and influence, it comes down to a couple very easy and simple things that I encourage all success-hungry players of this server to emulate. But not only this, Star was quite a politically savvy player. He saw the power that a fully united North could wield. In Star's words, it was very clear that Bardonia was an uncheckable power. The only way to keep the North safe from them was to win them over with friendships and official pacts. In an alliance like this, the Silver Coalition received two strong allies who naturally buffered 70% of our border. And so, he met with Uni to make this ideal reality come true. During that meeting, Star showed Uni the secret alliance that he had drawn up with Asharia. And Uni said, "Wait, you're allied with Asharia?" "Yes, secretly." "I'm secretly allied with Asharia." Cue the pog face. Something was forming here. Something big. Something beautiful. Something that would bring power to the north. So back in his home city of Najerajad, Star drew up a treaty to bind Bardonia, Asharia, and the Silver Coalition into an unstoppable force. And in a secret meeting between these three major world leaders, the North became unified into the Trillium Alliance. In the timeline of world politics, Trillium was formed right as Delatra came to the throne of Yimu-Audal. Now, one of the problems that these super alliances have most of the time is that they have nothing to do with each other until someone attacks them. But that wasn't Trillium. Trillium was not reactionary. They already had enemies, and they already had plans. One of the major things in their crosshairs was an increasing problem that seemed to affect everyone in Rathnir: bandits. As Yimu-Audal seemed to start destabilizing under Delatra's reign, bandits would set up shop there, and they'd roam Rathnir, plundering and terrorizing other countries before storing all their loot in their bases within YA's borders. Right near Asharia's border lay one of these bandit strongholds, a castle called the Last Bastion, home to a famous bandit group, the Pillagers. The Pillagers attacked and burned down 3 of Asharia's northern towns, and they supposedly tried to threaten and murder some Bardonian citizens. The instability wrought by Delatra's reign proved a threat to the members of Trillium, and perhaps world peace at large. Although, side note, in the sake of fairness, there was also some of that Gablusi Bandosi coming out of Bardankia. You know what I mean. Like and subscribe to Stoneworks for Gablusi Bandosi. Out of these circumstances arose the 3 main objectives for the members of Trillium that I don't think they explicitly planned, but they did act towards. 1. They needed to take out the bandits themselves. 2. They needed to have Yimu-Audal stabilized with a Trillium-friendly leader. 3. In order for that to happen, they needed to undercut the legitimacy of Delatra's regime. So, in the next few days, the members made a series of moves against banditry and its home in Yimu-Audal. A delegation from Trillium, consisting of 5 Bardonian senators, Star 67 from the Silver Coalition, and Zika Ost and Debbie from Asharia, met with the founder and elder council member of Yimu-Audal, Player's Story Studio. They told him that they wanted one of their boys in YA to be appointed regent to Delatra. The player, Gray, is yes. Story Studio told them, "We need to vote for a new regent. It'll take a bit of time," to which the Bardonian said, "No, it won't. It'll happen now, and it will be Gray." Story Studio got in contact with his people, and that night, Gray as yes was appointed regent. And good timing too, because Delatra just got banned for some shady gambling she was doing. People, we still have strict rules on this server. Now for Trillium. When Gray as yes hopefully became the official leader of Yimu-Audal, he would clamp down on the bandits hiding in his nation, and he would be agreeable to the Alliance's aspirations. After that, Asharia and Bardonia spearheaded a direct assault on the Pillager's stronghold in Yimu-Audal. Trillium got some YA soldiers to help attack the Last Bastion and clear its criminal bandits, and so together they marched down onto the stronghold. As Dex OG and Viewed heard of this, they placed down stacks of TNT, and they blew the fortress apart from within. Dex OG would be found standing on the walls of his burning castle, shouting, "Long live the Last Bastion! Forever free of the toxic Killium tryhards!" Trillium forces surrounded the Bastion, with the bandits firing down upon them from the towers. And slowly, by building overhead cover, they were able to tunnel their way up into the ruined tower heads, finally slaying the bandits and occupying the tower for over 90 minutes. But as this went down, player The Real J2, who was both a bandit and a former military general of Yimu-Audal, snuck into Bardonia and stole a whole bunker's worth of gear. The Battle of the Last Bastion itself was certainly won by Trillium, but Bardonia was left bitter with this theft. And lastly, Zika Ost picked up a rising gang working around the region. He gave them sanctuary and funding, promised them government titles in newly acquired territories, and the Emperor orchestrated with its leader, one Mr. Krakowski. And this, my dear viewer, is where we run into Delatra's story. assassination, covert operations, declarations, usurpations. With the crown of Yimu Outall missing, Zika Ost took an opportunity to step in and declare control of Yimu Outall for himself. The rest of Trillium had been planning for Grey as Yes to eventually ascend to the throne and become tighter with Asharia then. So this initiation came as quite a surprise, but they rolled with it. Skip the step of Grey's ascension and manually bring Yimu Outall under their control. It was here that the world of Rathnir knew. Trillium and the world had begun an inevitable descent that could only end in war. Zika Ost's simple act of sitting on Yimu Outall's throne was the spark that set off a powder keg in world politics. Deep political fractures suddenly erupted, a myriad of small nations declared themselves supporting either side, and webs of super alliances were spun out into every corner of Rathnir. But even in this, Trillium's own territories saw violent instability. On the Asharian Isle of Tessel, the newly formed Order of Aurora rebelled against the Emperor for his sinful power grabbing, and the old bandit Viewed used this opportunity to go and slaughter them. The Aurorans then fled to Olderash, and they established the Kingdom of Aurora. With this taken care of, Bardonia further asserted itself on the world stage. There was a Walmart supermarket that had become a popular trade hub in the southern continent of Sorgliste, one that competed with Unicorn Boy's marketplace in Durastarok. So there they sent several Bardonian soldiers, who drew their swords and slaughtered the shoppers and workers there. In a last-ditch effort, the shopkeeper, player Scavenish, challenged the fiercest Bardonian warrior to an honorable duel. Player back to the hub. And just like that, Walmart was closed. But this is not where the interventions of Bardonia ended. You see, at this time, Emperor Zika Ost had published a list of the Alliance's proscripted enemies, those who he accused of terrorism and disturbing the peace, who would immediately be executed if found in any Trillium territories. One of the leaders on this list, a Hewitkin noble named Jane the Bane, responded by joining and leading an insurrectionist movement, one which worked to take refugees from Trillium, isolate Bardonia from the Silver Coalition's treaties, liberate Ernu-Arak from Asharia, and eventually assassinate Emperor Zika Ost. But while Bardonia was investigating some stolen war materials, they discovered Jane's insurgency, and over stolen property and a conspiracy, they came to her home city of Tlahadal, and they occupied the streets and demanded her arrest. Once she saw this, she took a few guards, and she barricaded herself in the central temple of the city. The Hewitkin leaders, Tlatoani King Zelorm and the Kiwakoat, Infinik, met with them, but the Bardonians were obstinate. Bring us Jane, or this city is ours. The scope of this was lost on no one, for Hewitka was an ally of Yimu Outall and many other nations, so here Bardonia was threatening a world war over this single rebel. Zelorm and Infinik stood between them and the temple. They said there was no conspiracy. Nothing had happened for Hewitka to betray one of their own. So Moy used his town claim, and he declared a war on the city of Tlahadal. The clock was now ticking, for in 24 hours, Bardonia would be able to invade, pillage, and raze the city. But the Tlatoani and Kiwakoat tried to cool things down. All right, they said. They could bring Jane to trial. They'd meet in Durastarok, and they'd have a third-party judge, player Lukdi of Vrealea. Jane told Infinik to bring her there, but she was denied because she would just inflame things. At the trial, in the courtroom, the Bardonians lawyered against the Hewitkin Council, King Zelorm, Vikit, and RedFireRex, as they demanded that the Hewitkin government apologize to Bardonia and denounce and exile Jane. The negotiations and arguments dragged on for hours and got heated. Jane was sitting there, besieged in the temple and building fortifications for the imminent war, and she was begging her allies to bring reinforcements and hold the city from the Bardonian tyrants. The rest of the world braced itself. Was this the moment that Trillium unleashed and came for them all? As Jane was seen behind her walls with bow in hand, and the Bardonians set up defensive positions around the temple, the three Hewitkins pulled through, and they got a favorable settlement in the trial, only having to publicly apologize and humiliate themselves a bit to the Bardonians. Jane, though, was incensed at this. She had done nothing wrong, nothing for the Hewitkins to apologize for. Inside the temple, she launched into a tirade, denouncing her leaders as cowards and traitors. And so, feeling betrayed by her own government, she slipped through a hole in the Bardonian siege, and she fled to the nation of Carve. For 5 hours, Rathnir had stood on the brink of total war because of some rambunctious noble and Bardonia's belligerent response. But the time of Moi's war came and went without any struggle, and in the end, Trillium had gotten what they wanted. With Bardonia's influence creeping across Rathnir, the consolidation of power crept into the Silver Coalition, culminating in the New Year's Revolution. Star 6-7 witnessed Trillium become the dominating global hegemon from his halls in Najerajad, but he found his nation was unnecessarily meek and unrecognized on the world stage, so he conspired with the other kings of the coalition to usurp the bickering lords of the nation's Noxnorian heartland. On New Year's Day, he rallied his allies and armies together, and they marched into the city of Sovdal and shot flaming arrows into the palace walls of King Darkblade T2. Standing above the crowd and holding an ancient silver sword over his head, Star 6-7 declared himself as the first High Silver King, with the Silver Coalition dissolved and reorganized into the Sterling Crown Lands. And there was thunderous applause. Star addressed the crowd. Tonight, there is one true nation of the North, for any challenges to our ideal union will be swiftly met by the Silver Sword. Look now as the gods have come to guide us, Afton, Rorus, and Luna, for the full moon rises in the east. This shall be our year, the beginning of a glorious new era for all Rathnir. The noble houses of Noxnor watched from within their homes. Their council voted to play it slowly and carefully while Star's revolution filled the city. And so to his face they accepted the revolution and they hailed him as High King. But behind their eyes there was a bloodthirsty fire, hungry for vengeance. In a desert frontier town of Yimu Audal, the Elder Council and newly elected Empress Carpicius met to make sense of their bleak situation. They pored over maps and argued about their next steps to hold off their ever-strengthening enemies. Some proposed border fortifications, others to march and liberate the capital of Ernu-Arak. But Carpicius drew a long arrow around Asharia, through Bardonia and into the north. She explained, Audalite, Trillium lives in authoritarianism and breeds a new dominating order. So we bring chaos to them, and they'll collapse under their own weight. This sparked a heated debate, for such a campaign would be costly, risky, and unpredictable. What would they do when confronted with the massive armies of Asharia and Bardonia? Just then arrived Darkblade T2 and Julie Jajo, who told the Council of the New Year's Revolution, the Sterling Crowned Lands, and the coming revolt of the Noxnorians, where they planned to get the new leadership drunk at a party and break through the walls to butcher them like sheep. Carpicius smiled and said to her council, Seems like the fire's already started, and she pledged troops to assist in the Noxnorian revolt. She then addressed her council, who held an uneasy air about all this going down. Everyone, the war is here. My chief diplomat, do your duty and call the allied banners of the lesser nations. My council members, do your duty and follow me, who you have chosen to lead you in these darkest times. I, for my part, will perform my duty to destroy our enemies and bring the light of God back to her world. That's what you wanted? And you'll help when they come for us, right? So they rallied an army from the desert towns of Yimu Audal, and Carpicius declared total war on Asharia, Bardonia, and the Sterling Crowned Lands. And under the cover of night, they marched east to Asharia and plunged Rathnir into World War. Stay tuned for Part 3, and join the server at play.stoneworks.gg to make stories just like these for yourself.